There's been a general renewed interest in real-time strategy games lately, but I've noticed that many of these games are often missing features that have been baseline in the genre for decades. I figured, therefore, it'd be a good idea to go over a list of standard baseline features, stuff that's normal, typical, and worth having in any real-time strategy game. I tried to make sure this was somewhat independent of design, so you wouldn't necessarily have to be building a StarCraft clone for these to apply, for instance. Ideally, going forward, all RTS games would implement them. They would be a standard baseline, and therefore, let's get started. So the biggest thing that needs to be available, which is a general baseline in gaming as a whole, is control remapping. Basically, everything should be rebindable. Every single action, camera movement, control groups, adding camera location keys is great too. Having just your standard everything, all the stuff in the command card, everything units can do should be rebindable. And it should, to the greatest extent possible, be as close to the actual game's UI as possible. See StarCraft 2 right now for an example. Having a list is not enough. Ideally, modifier keys would be usable while remapping as well. For example, Age of Empires 4 does this quite well. Control groups are a feature that most RTS games have, and they're never quite implemented the same way twice. Generally, you want to have the ability to create groups, to add to groups, to create groups while stealing from their current group, to add to a group while stealing from a current group, and to remove from a group. There's a lot of different applications for these, but having all of them available to the player, however they choose to configure them, is just the best for everyone. Middle mouse drag scrolling, not as common as control groups and should be in every game, is also a feature that never gets added the same way twice. Generally, there's two ways of having it work. Either you move the map like you're dragging it with your hand, or you're pushing the cursor and pushing the camera with it. Make sure to add that toggle. It's usually called invert drag scroll. Having an alert key is a common feature, though has been kind of falling out of favor lately with a lot of streamlining, so don't forget that. Being able to just go back to whatever just happened, super important. Another feature that very commonly existed in earlier games, but I've seen several demos not implemented, is being able to actually do actions through the minimap, either right-click or if you selected an ability and left-clicked on the minimap, having that go through the minimap. Many new games, you just click on the minimap and it moves the camera. Also, if your interface happens to have a lot of abilities or a lot of buildings, usually buildings and units, if there's a lot of those that you can build at a time, please, please, please use a tabbed UI. A lot of games will use a paginated UI or a list-based UI. Tabbed UI is just way easier to navigate, way easier to mentally organize. It's something that not having it kind of makes sense from a nostalgia perspective, but is really worth doing. There's a reason the Command & Conquer games moved to a tabbed UI with Red Alert 2. So that basically covers it for general purpose features that every RTS game should have. Now, if your game happens to be multiplayer, replays are really good to have and should be distributed to all players when the game is done. And for both replays and spectating, both which should be available, being able to toggle the fog of war and change player perspective is crucial. Like, have that. Thank you for watching, and hopefully that helps to understand a baseline feature set for your real-time strategy game. Have a good night.